All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask Jim Warnock to take it from here with opening remarks and presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Oakley. First of all, I want to welcome everyone and thank you for your flexibility. Given the current spike in COVID cases here in Vermont, we're paying attention to Commissioner Mark Levine, the governor, and the CDC recommendations. One about all to be safe in our gatherings, and so we've gone back to a virtual mode here. To get us started, Aaron Warnock is going to make some opening comments, and then we're going to get right into our presentation.
Yeah, hi everyone. Please use the chat feature as well if you can't hear us or anything is not clear, and we'll be monitoring that. My name is Aaron Warnock. I lived here in Lincoln, of course, and grew up here, went to the Lincoln Community School, and moved back about 6 years ago with my family, in big part because of this amazing community and vibrant school that we have. So have been part of this amazing team in trying to keep our school open, and really appreciate all of the conversation and questions that have been coming our way. As you know, at this point, our group has been working incredibly hard to make sure that we can be as transparent with the financial details and the entire process and how it works, and to answer all of your questions. There's been lots of questions and conversation and chatter on Front Porch Forum, which has been fabulous. And our group has been capturing all of those questions. And so what we're going to be doing tonight is to walk through a version of the presentation that we did last week. We were kind of trying to figure out, because we know there'll be some people who are also at that presentation, but then some people who are also joining for the first time. And we do want to remind people that our full presentation is from last week is on our website at safecommunityschools.com or .org, excuse me, as well as updated Q&A that we've been adding on there as well. So tonight you're going to see a version of the presentation that has been updated with updated information that we have learned and kind of evolved due to lots of the questions that we've gotten. And then we are going to dive into the finances again, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A at the end. And we've left quite a bit of time for that because we do want to make sure that we can answer as many questions as we can. And during that Q&A part, what we're going to do first is read through most of the questions that we've gotten on Front Porch Forum and through email, and then we'll make an attempt and do the best we can to answer all of those, because we want every single person to feel heard. And if we can't answer your question, we're also going to be really honest about that, because as you know, this is an incredibly complex situation. And the other thing I just want to mention before we jump in is that some of our group did spend a few hours with Patrick Green and Floyd Davidson yesterday, superintendent and business manager, and really kind of talking about what we agree on, what we disagree on, kind of where their assumptions are, or what their assumptions were, and kind of making some financial models, and what ours were as well. And although we kind of came out with it agreeing to disagree, I think we all have a ton of respect for the very difficult jobs that everybody has. And, you know, my biggest takeaway from that was really to be reminded of the difference in priorities. So the superintendent's office and central office has a very big job in making sure that they are doing what's best for the children, or what they feel is best for the children of the entire district. While our priorities here in Lincoln are to make sure that we're taking the best care of the Lincoln children that we can. And we feel that as a group, we feel that educating them here in Lincoln is the best option.
Recording in progress.
So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, Jim, and Paul, and Jeannie's also going to be helping fill in as well, because she has been one of the financial masterminds behind trying to figure out this very complex situation.
Thank you, Erin. We wanted to open with a statement about, if you could go back one, Paul, about community schools, just to kind of ground our conversation this evening and to remind everyone that what we're talking about here is the community school as a public school that is in fact the hub of the neighborhood, unites families, educators, and community partners to provide all students with top quality academics, enrichment, health, and social services, opportunity to succeed in life and in school. And I would also add that our goal here in moving forward, should we prevail with a yes vote, and should the other towns agree to accommodate our withdrawal, etc., we would be moving towards retaining public school status. I just want to underscore that right off the bat, that we're not moving to privatization or anything of that sort. So just to be clear on that. Some of the topics that we'll be addressing again, and we are, it's interesting, if we had a live presentation here, as many facilitators would do, we could do a show of hands and ask how many people were here on the 10th, how many folks have perhaps accessed the recording from the 10th online, and we could get a quick read on how many folks have already been through the prior presentation. We really can't do that in any reliable way now. So we, as Erin said, we're going to be going through the presentation as we did last time in an abbreviated fashion in order to preserve as much time as possible to answer the really important questions that have been raised. We do want to underscore again, how does withdrawal work? What are the actual steps in terms of the timeline? The reality of Act 46, the promise, and the fact that it hasn't delivered. We also want to take a look again at the superintendent's proposal to repurpose the Lincoln Community School, which was unveiled at the December 7th, 2020 board meeting. We'll be looking at financial implications. And again, we're going to be preserving, as Erin said, a fair amount of time for question and answer.
Sorry, I'm seeing a few hands raised, and we are going to do Q&A at the end. So if it's something regarding not being able to hear or see, I think, Oakley, do you want people to just chat that to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So once again, our goal is that the Lincoln Community School would continue as a K-6 public school, open and free to all Lincoln children and run by our own school board. So that's the destination, that's the target. And at the grades 7 through 12, there would be school choice. We have received some questions about school choice, and so we want to respond to some of those in the process of presenting some additional information. Paul, if you want to forward. It's important to note that this notion of school choice is steeped in Vermont history. In fact, Vermont led the nation in what was called town tuition plans, and originated in 1869. So this is the oldest version, if you will, of school choice in the country. I know that there's been some confusion about school choice, that somehow it means privatization or something else. And I just want to kind of set the record clear here that when we talk about school choice, we're talking about the opportunity for parents, students in a particular town, that's a choice town, to have a choice as to where they will attend grades 7 and 8 or grades 9 through 12, or in some towns in Vermont, which are complete choice towns, K through 12. Now, currently, there are 81 school choice towns in Vermont. So I just want to put that in perspective, that Lincoln, if Lincoln were to become a school choice town, we're not braving some frontier and carving out a new, kind of a new direction. We'll be joining another 81 towns that currently have some version of school choice. So I want to be really clear about that. And at the secondary level, as we've shared earlier, there'll be some options in terms of, and our estimation is that the vast majority of students here in Lincoln will probably opt to go to Mount A. There's also the possibility of Middlebury, Virgins, CVU, and so a little more to come on that in just a bit. Many schools in Vermont will actually have a lower tuition rate than what we currently pay per pupil for Mount A. If you've looked at Addison County for pupil expenditures at high school level, Mount A is hands down, I should say hands up, whatever, the most expensive. So I'm not offering that as a promise that there's going to be substantial savings. But what I am saying is that school choice does not automatically mean that we're going to be spending more money. In fact, it may be quite the contrary. Another important piece of becoming a standalone district is that the state will assign Lincoln to an existing supervisory union. We talked about this at our last session. There were certain central office services that we will need to contract for, and they are services that have to be provided by a central office, particularly around special education, and now especially that the funding is moved to block grant. There has to be a centralized pass-through, if you will, of those funds before they make their way to the local school. And equally important will be monitoring of students on individual education plans, otherwise known as IEPs, to ensure that they are consistent with state and federal law. Certainly payroll services, transportation, food service, extended learning programs, and certain funds that will become available either through the feds or through some state programs. Professional development programs, which would obviously benefit teachers in Lincoln, since we wouldn't have the scale to necessarily provide certain kinds of professional development, but coupled with a number of other towns in the supervisory union, we would be able to access that. One of the significant questions that was raised at our last session was, gee, if we're just going to align with another SU, aren't we right back where we were? And the answer is no, because we will no longer be a member town in a unified school district with one school board that's administering all of the town schools, which is currently what we have in MAUSD. We will be a town with its own school board accessing specific central office services. A couple of other things that we want to, and I think it might be on the next slide, I'm not sure. No, let's go back to the SU slide. Just a couple of other things. Because we will still be a public school, and because teachers will be working under a teaching contract, that will be the contract that the existing SU that we will affiliate with will have in place. Our teachers will continue to contribute percentage of their salary to the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System. And when they eventually retire, they are going to be accessing their pension through the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System, just as they are doing now. So there's going to be no change in pension for teachers. Wanted to be clear about that because an excellent question was raised about who's going to cover the pension if we're no longer in the school district. So we wanted to be really clear about that. Another question that's come up frequently is about staff and hiring staff. As Erin had said, we've been working very hard in accessing as many individuals as we can who have the expertise and the experience base to help inform our thinking. Several of us have met with former superintendents as recently as this morning, and we've been assured that it's highly likely that we would be retaining our current staff. So we would be looking at the current staff being transitioned, and that they would arrive in a new teacher's contract affiliated with a different supervisory union, but with their seniority intact and other rights and property rights per their tenure as teachers. And I think also it's important to realize that SUs will exercise flexibility in terms of how they may provide some services, like, for instance, transportation to food service. And while it may be centralized, we do know that there are SUs in which it's contracted out for various towns. So there's all sorts of opportunities and flexibility to access these services. And again, I think what will be really important is that we are able to align with a supervisory union that will have a deeply, rooted commitment to the enormous value of small schools. So the withdrawal timeline we looked at before, we've kind of broken this down visually so that we're not presenting a lot of information and one fell swoop, but rather looking at this sequentially in terms of steps, beginning with this coming Tuesday when we have a town vote. If that town vote is in fact a yes vote to withdraw, then, as we've indicated before, it's per statute, the other 4 towns in our current unified district will have to vote. And Paul, I believe it's within 90 days. Am I correct?
It's within 90 days, yes.
Yeah. So it'll be a responsibility of the district to warn a vote within 90 days. And if I'm correct also, I believe the vote would be on the same day in each of the towns.
Yes, has to be the same date.
Yeah. And this is the actual statute is 721, 16 VSA with 1721, and it has to be unanimous. So we have to get the okay of every single one of these 4 towns. If that occurs, then we'll get state board conditional approval pending acceptance of a successfully negotiated exit agreement, in which we will have to negotiate any financial arrangements with the district and encumbrances, et cetera. And I think also the exit agreement would allow us to successfully, I think, leave without any further financial responsibilities. So that would be resolved, those would be resolved, whatever they may be. And then we would be in a situation, by the way, quite similar to what Ripon just experienced, where we would hold a town vote to elect a school board, establish a budget, identify the staffing for the school, and also declare the assignation of a supervisory union. And as you can see, the timeline for that, July 22 to July 23. So the target date for Lincoln to emerge as a standalone district with a fully operating public K-6 school with 712 school choice would be July 1st, 2023. Probably the biggest question that we've received in some way, shape, or form, both on Front Porch Forum, in personal emails, and in conversations with neighbors and friends, is why are we withdrawing now? And there's a couple of important reasons why. As you can see from the timeline, there's certain required periods of time that have to be observed. So it's a fairly lengthy process. We've also reckoned with the fact that since the advent of Act 46, we really have not seen the hoped for savings and efficiencies. And in fact, quite the contrary, we are seeing now the possibility of being closed as an elementary school. This was driven home kind of painfully on December 7th when we were made aware of the superintendent's proposal to repurpose the Lincoln School. Now, we can debate whether or not repurposing is tantamount to closing. We may have an opinion about that. Certainly, we've got legal advice about that, but I believe we can say in all certainty that if you close a K-6 school and utilize that facility for whatever other purpose, call it what you will, a senior center, an innovation center, etc., it is no longer a K-6 school. You have effectively closed the school. And that's our take on it. We also look at the solicitation by the MAUSD board of proposals. Our team submitted a proposal. We're one of 5. And as we've mentioned before, these proposals were submitted with a hard deadline of May 4th, which we beautifully did. And by the way, our proposal is available on the district website. I believe it's still available on the district website. It's a bold proposal, but it's a proposal that is steeped in what we feel is compelling and in many cases very current research on the enormous value of small schools. And it's also a proposal that we believe is financially viable as an alternative to closing the small schools in the district, Robinson, Beaman, and especially Lincoln. The other factor that has come into play is the rather fast-track merger study committee with Addison Northwest. And as we talked about before, this is what's sometimes referred to as a Section 706 committee because of the kind of remarkable statutory power that is invested in this merger study committee. To kind of shed a little bit more light on this merger study committee, I think that's our next slide, Paul. Let's see what we have. Well, just to follow up on what we talked about in terms of Act 46, we have not seen school costs decrease, nor have we seen any significant improvement in quality. And we have seen a loss of our ability to control our own educational future. And unfortunately, we're seeing one of the ramifications of Act 46 has been in the wake of consolidation, the closing of small schools. I have a painful example of that next door with the town. And by the way, I should note that in both Addison Central, that Ripon recently withdrew from, and Addison Northwest, where Addison was hoping to withdraw from, neither of those districts had articles of agreement which allowed towns to vote on whether their school could be closed. We, however, do have that, although the argument that repurposing is not the same as closing has been used as a pretext for not having to worry or allow or be concerned with the town voting. Now, the superintendent's proposal came in 2 phases, and this may look out of sequence here, but what we've done is to visually present phase 2 first, because frankly, phase 1 is very much in progress, although the timeline has been extended significantly. We'll get to that in a moment. But what is dramatically in play right now is phase 2 of the superintendent's proposal, which is to merge with Addison Northwest. I'm going to make this a rhetorical question, but in response to the question that we are asked frequently, which is why withdraw now? Our retort has been, why merge now? What we can see around merging when the board has generously solicited community proposals, which we earnestly worked on and submitted by the May 4th, only to find that the consideration of that and the process for, presenting and having it considered has been extended and extended. It is now going to be December. And in addition, as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you know, we have, the board, I should say, has hired a consultant from Massachusetts, Mr. Nate Levinson, who will be orchestrating this process of quote unquote vetting the proposals. That proposal is, that process is going to involve the creation of yet another committee, which will be the Community Input Committee. And that committee is going to be charged with, in essence, vetting these proposals. But first, they're going to work to establish criteria by which the proposals will be assessed. I want to repeat that again because there's an element of incredulity here. The criteria are going to be established after the proposals have been submitted. Now, when we submitted our proposal, we did have criteria, and those criteria were included in a board communication soliciting proposals. And the solicitation for proposals indicated that a strong proposal will, and there were 6 criteria, certainly be financially and legally viable, ensure a quality education for all students in the 5 towns, improve outcomes for students, alignment with the MAUSD core educational values, you can find those on their website, align with the MAUSD strategic plan, and finally, number 6, be a long-range plan for the district in terms of facilities. And that is exactly what we focused on in preparing our proposal. We now are reckoning with the reality that the criteria are likely going to be different in some way, shape, or form. And so we have a significant level of concern about that. And meanwhile, we have phase 2 already in play. Before phase 1 of the superintendent's proposal or phase 1, any of the other community proposals have even been considered. And of course, phase 1, as we learned on December 7th, was to repurpose schools, to basically close Lincoln Community Schools, as well as Robinson, and Beaman, and to bus Lincoln K-5 students to Bristol Elementary, with grade 6 students joining 7th and 8th graders at Mount A. So we're, again, trying to visually share with you a level of concern that we have that phase 2 seems to be trumping not only phase 1 of the superintendent's plan, but any of the other proposals that were dutifully submitted for consideration. As I mentioned, our proposal was steeped and really based quite firmly and strongly on the research that we have looked at around the benefit of small schools. And again, when we talk about small schools at the elementary level, looking at the pioneering work that Craig Howley and his colleagues have done, you see the attribution at the bottom of the screen. We're talking about 200 students or less. And we know that smaller school size, and again, I want to underscore, it's not just the size of the school, it's the quality of the leadership and the talents that exist on the staff. And I'm proud to say that in Lincoln, we have both in abundance, that smaller school size has been associated with higher achievement under certain conditions, and those conditions are at play in Lincoln. Smaller schools promote substantially improved equity and achievement among students. And when we talk about equity, we're talking about each student getting what he or she needs in order to be successful. Not everyone getting the same amount of something. That would be equality. And then finally, small schools have definitely been shown to be especially important for economically disadvantaged students. So we're sharing this with you as, I guess, a way of reinforcing our belief that our proposal is based on some very compelling research. And we certainly hope that the other proposals, I know at least one or two, are also based on some very, very compelling research, that this will be considered by Mr. Levinson and also by the Community Input Committee as an important criteria that needs to be carefully considered when these proposals are being vetted.
Hi, Mary, I think Mary Gimignani is going to address this slide. Mary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sure can. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, good. First of all, let me just tell you who I am a little bit. So I do live here in Lincoln, and I've taught in this district for around a little bit over 30 years at different grade levels, and as being an assistant principal at Moncton, and I've also taught in New Haven. So I've taught in small schools before, and that doesn't count the time that I've taught in at the preschool. And also, I currently, for the last 7 or 8 years, have been supervising student teachers for Northern Vermont University, and have been in and out of many schools. So I want to point out this quote at the top. The unnamed, for obvious reasons, educator let us use this quote. And no matter how many special education students we have, we're incredibly under-resourced. Kids are not getting what they need. And this, I know, is not the feeling or the observation of just one teacher, because I have heard that over and over, and I would encourage you as well, if you can get anyone brave enough to speak out about that, you will hear that too. Students with special needs in small schools, as was just pointed out by Jim, the research says that students in small schools do really very, very well. And prior to the current model that is being used in our district, students were receiving services that fit their needs, were appropriate to their IEPs. Their IEPs were being legally met. And there's been a long track record of this kind of great care that students have been getting. I would like to point out, I was talking to another teacher today who mentioned that in small schools, students don't fall through the cracks. And that has been my experience as well. In our small school in Lincoln, historically, I would say, the students are really taken care of. They're really wrapped around. And the other thing this teacher said to me today was that to suggest that in a small school, it is not possible to take care of a child with serious needs is she felt that was very insulting to her. So the research really does show that I have no doubt that Lincoln School can take care of any child that we as a community will want to take care of, any child, special needs or on IEPs that lives in our community. So I don't think there's any need for us to be at all worried about those children who need something extra. As long as initially people are feeling like they don't have the resources to do the best job they can, but I don't think as a community we would let that happen. All right.
That's Mary.
That's it for me.
Thanks so much, Mary. And So I just want to underscore what Mary just shared with us and remind us all that it's really important for us to look back at Lincoln Community Schools' track record and remind ourselves that this is a school that can, in fact, roll up its sleeves and serve the needs of special needs students. I was at dinner with some folks who have kids in the school who were recalling certain special needs students who were tremendously assimilated into the life of the school and who had a powerful impact on the non-special needs students who had a real viable opportunity to get to know and support and become friends with students with very, very different kinds of needs. And but all of them students, all kids, wanted to be kids and wanted to be successful as students. I just want to thank you again, Mary, for your comments. As far as responding again to the question, why now? We would have to say, bottom line is that the 706B merger study changed everything. Because suddenly there was a timeline set up and the potential for a merger with the possibility of that merger being on ballots for voter approval at town meeting in March of 2022. Do we have votes here?
Well, they're here, so I'll have to take it there.
Yep.
What you do from here?
No, that's fine. Yep. So just a couple of things, again, to share with you about the kind of remarkable statutory latitude that this merger study committee has. A newly appointed merger committee supersedes the elected school board. And what we mean is that the committee has the power to recommend that the districts merged create new articles of agreement and would have full authority to close schools without a town vote. So it's entirely possible that a new district could be proposed by this merger study committee, and that recommendation would go to the state board. And if there was a recommendation to merge, it would go directly to the State Board of Education and goes to both districts to have the district commingled votes to approve the merger and new articles of agreement. So this is a committee, to get back to our first bullet, that would supersede the elected school boards, because this committee could go directly to the state board with a recommendation for merging. And of course, the first thing that a newly merged and a newly consolidated district would do would be to establish articles of agreement. There's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that those articles of agreement would include what we currently have in our articles of agreement here in the formation of MAUSD, which is the right of the town to vote as to whether or not a school gets closed. So the longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes to withdraw. And it is possible that we may in fact not have that option. So I'm hoping that that's going to help folks understand why it's so important that we're moving forward now. And again, as we've explained numerous times, why it seems on the surface to be a contradiction that we are earnestly trying to stay in the district, work with the district. We have a proposal. We would love to get in front of the board and present our proposal and share the research. And at the same time, here we are moving forward to withdraw. Aren't these contradictory? In fact, they're not, if you consider the fact that both are viable options for achieving our primary objective, which is to keep the Lincoln Community School open. And our commitment is to exercise any option that we feel is viable in accomplishing that objective.
People are asking for it to go.
Yeah, it's just we have.
Yep. So here's what we're trying to do, folks. We're trying to avoid this. We're trying to avoid two trains on two tracks merging towards the same December 2021 deadline, where you have the merger study committee likely making its recommendation in preparation for something on the ballots on town meeting in March 2022, and the proposal process being facilitated by Mr. Levinson that will be making its recommendations, so to speak, to the MAUSD board in December. And again, we see the value of stepping away from the merger study committee. Let's focus on the proposal process. That's what we got started. We were invited after December 7th to submit proposals. And we think that that should play out and that the district should make a decision about how we want to utilize facilities moving forward, and then consider the feasibility of possibly merging with another district. But instead, we're looking at, in fact, the merger study committee full steam ahead. And meanwhile, the proposal process now being slowed down with an extended timeline to December, both of them bearing down on the same point in time. And as we had shared with Mr. Levinson, the primary authors of our proposal in our first and the only Zoom session we've had with him thus far, that wouldn't it be entirely likely that if the merger study committee were to move full steam ahead, that it would make moot any of the proposals, because those proposals were only pertinent to MAUSD. And the merger study committee would now be looking at MAUSD, in fact, dissolving and becoming part of a larger district. So, unanswered question, very disturbing for us. What we know that local control will give us is we vote in our own school board. We can vote on an understandable, detailed school budget annually, and will include a set of SU costs. Everything will be incredibly transparent and easy to understand. We can make our hiring decisions in conjunction with the SU. Again, the best information we've received from former superintendents who have assured us it's highly likely that we would be continuing with current staff. We can make decisions on programming, especially around some wonderful, wonderful opportunities like how the Jackson Woods recently bequeathed to the town would be utilized. We can make decisions on the school building, and should we choose, we'd have the ability to be creative on additional uses of the building. We would, in essence, be in charge of our own destiny. I will also tell you, in response to numerous questions, that there are things that we will learn as we move forward. We are not necessarily aware of every single piece of information that we need to know at the current time. I'm just being honest with you. But we do believe that as we move forward in this process, we will be on a learning curve, again, similar to our neighbors in Ripton have been experiencing as well. Some additional benefits to voting yes, to retain our property values by having a vibrant school in this community, ensuring that Lincoln remains a thriving town that attracts young families. Again, school choice for grades 7 to 12 can be a very attractive option for any number of families. Keeps our young students educated in our community. And again, it would certainly be in our best interest to be joining the supervisory union that supports and values small schools. And again, we would be returning to what we believe are one of the basic tenets of Vermont and Vermont life, which is local control.
Thanks, Jim. This is Paul Forlenza. I'm going to take you through a series of slides. I think there are about 8 or 9 or 10, talking about what the financial impact is of withdrawing from the district. I don't think I've ever encountered something more complicated than education financing. I've been developing for the last 6 years the town budget, which in the beginning I thought was complicated and now seems like a piece of cake compared to this. So Jeannie Albert and Andrew Furch and myself have been working on this for many months and have put in many hours. We are not going to call ourselves experts, but we think we have a handle on the main issues. So first question is, how do we currently fund Lincoln education? So the way this works, since we're in the district, is that the educational costs, which in FY21 were $27 million, get apportioned to Lincoln based on numbers of students. So our portion is 14.28%, which is $3.9 million. So how do we pay for that $3.9 million? Well, we collect property taxes, and we are taxed either on the value of our property or a combination of our income and the value of our property. What we collect through those two methods is $2.3 million. The rest is picked up by the state education fund. And a similar process would continue when we were associated with a supervisory union. So that adds up to 3.9. You'll notice that somewhere there's missing $5,000. I think that was because we got a credit for that. The source for this information came from the Agency of Education. I think you remember that Act 46 had certain incentives, which if we joined, we would have a decrease in tax rates. So for us in FY19, our tax rate was lowered 8 cents, and then 6 cents, and then 4 cents, and then 2 cents. So while that was great, what it does is when you analyze it, it really distorts what the true tax rate was. And those incentives end in FY22, so there are none going forward. So what I've done was went back the last 4 years for when we had our own school board and were part of the supervisory union in Mount A, but it was not a consolidated district, which is a difference. And you can see there what the tax rates were. And then I have up for the next 4 years what the tax rates have been as we've been part of the MA USD district. Now, I don't want to make too much of this slide. What it points out to me is if you look at the averages for 4 years for us, our average is 1.54, and within the district is 1.57. 3 cents difference. You could argue that that's because every year things get more expensive. The important part for me is that we have not seen a decrease or a significant savings in the tax rate since we've consolidated. Another question is when we withdraw and join a supervisory union, what happens to the debt on our school building? If you remember, I think it was about 10 years ago, we took out a bond and did a lot of remodeling. And I think there was an extension too. And that debt service, or the payment we need to make on an annual basis is $123,000. So that's what we made every year before we joined the district. Once we joined the district, then the 5 towns shared in the cost of that debt. So the burden to us was significantly less. According to Articles of Agreement, we can buy back the building for $1 and we assume the debt. So we would then need to build into our budgets, which you're going to see in a minute, the $123,000. We have approximately, so we won't become independent for another 2 years. We continue, even though we will get approved, we will continue to be part of the MAUSD district. They will make 2 additional payments. So in the year FY24, which calendar year is 2023, what remains to be paid off is $600,000. And we would pay that off through November of 2027. at the same annual payment, $123,000. So what we've tried to do is two things. One, I showed last time, which is to develop a budget for FY21, which has ended, which is just passed, showing what it would have been like if we had not been in the district. So we started with direct costs that we took right out of the MAUSD budget. We added indirect costs that were based on an analysis of
Coming across.
the Lincoln Community School budget for FY18, which was the last year we were an independent school, more or less. And then Jeannie talked to other standalone schools that have purchased its supervisory union services to get a feel for what those costs are. With school choice and option, we have made an assumption, and you could assume different percentages. We thought this was reasonable to make. So we assumed that 70% would go to Mount Abe of the 7th and 12th graders, 10% each to Middlebury, Champlain Valley, and to private schools. Now, as soon as we use the word private school, people get, lack of a better term, uptight, because they think we're going to be paying out $50,000 a year for every student that goes from private school. The reality is that the state calculates every year the average secondary tuition for all high schools in the state. And it's that average that we would pay. So if a private school costs $50,000, we would only pay in FY21 about $16,500, which actually is less than what we are paying to go to Mount Abe. And then we subtract out local revenue. We've been pretty modest in looking at what the local revenue is. So what do we get for services from the SU? Well, we're going to continue to have salary and benefits for our staff, our professional staff, our aides, art, music, wellness teachers, guidance counselors. And then we get all the other things that a supervisory union provides. And they don't necessarily have an option as to what they can provide. What they are required to provide is defined in statute. And so it's not like we're going to join up with a supervisory union and they're going to say, well, we're not going to give you this. They are required to. We obviously would pay for those services. The items that I have with an asterisk simply are some shared services with supervisory union. So here's our estimate for FY21 if we had been out of the district. We calculated that direct spending would be $1.5 million. Indirect spending would be $748,000. Now, somebody mistook that last time for $75,000, but it is $748,000. We add in the tuition, which is another $1.7 million. We subtract out local revenue, which is $50,000, and we come up with a total education cost of $3,900,000. We got that information from a variety of sources. We looked at documents from the district. We looked at documents from the community school, and we looked at budgets in other supervisory unions. So this is a slide a lot of people were sort of waiting for. I'll keep you in suspense a little longer. And that is that this looks at if you were paying income sensitivity. In other words, your tax would be calculated based on the value of your house. So that's the numbers going across the top. And then your household income, which are the numbers going down on the left. Income sensitivity, the reason I have $47,000, which is an odd number there, is because at that level, if you have income below that level, you get some extra credit. And above 138,500, income sensitivity disappears. So if you had a house that was somewhere between $100,000 and $400,000, and your income was somewhere between $47,000 and $120,000, there would be a modest savings. Remember, this is doing last year's budget as if we were not in the district. If you made $140,000, you might be saving $20 to $60 a year. And above that, you might be saving $50 to $125 in savings. Now, I really want to emphasize this over and over and over again. This is an estimate for FY21. It is not a prediction for what taxes would look like in the future. And I would really like people not to conclude with the feeling that if we leave the district, we're going to save money, or if we leave the district, we're going to pay more. The reality is it's more or less going to be the same. And it's really hard to pin down exactly what those numbers are. So in the first presentation we made on the 10th, we did not attempt to go beyond forecasting, beyond FY21. Now, what's happened since then is that the board of MAUSD had their annual retreat on Monday, the 16th. And during that retreat, the administration made a projection that property taxes for FY24 with Lincoln out of the district would increase 30%. I want to quickly tell you that we do not believe that's the case, and we're going to lay out our argument. We had a discussion with Patrick Ream and Floyd Davison on the 18th, and they were gracious enough to give us 2 hours of their time so that we could better understand what the assumptions were that went into their estimate. I just want to stop here and say, I really truly believe that Patrick and Floyd are doing the best job they can. And I hope we don't, in this process, end up demonizing them, because they really are trying to do the right thing in their view. Now, what I said to Patrick was, the difference is that he has responsibility for the welfare of the school district, and we have responsibility for the welfare of our community. And that's unfortunately, those two things sort of don't merge together. We did not agree with their assumptions, and therefore do not believe taxes will increase more than usual annual increase, whether in the district or not. So let's review some of these assumptions. The first one is that you may know about the excess spending per student penalty threshold. Every year, the state sets a figure that if you exceed that on a per student basis, you are penalized for every dollar over that. The legislature eliminated that threshold for the next 2 years, FY22 and FY23. The district assumed that that penalty was coming back. We do not see any indication that it's returning, because there is a serious problem in funding schools in this state, and the legislature, I believe, is stepping up to that. If it comes back, we do not believe it would be at the same level. Property yield. Property yield is a technical term. Basically, it means if you take all the value of all the houses in Vermont and all the spending on schools, public schools in Vermont, you can develop a property yield. And that changes on a yearly basis as the value of housing goes up and as student spending either goes up or goes down. So the district kept that at a constant. And we looked at it and said, let's use historical typical rates per year. Equalized students, again, equalized students is sort of a technical term, but basically it means a way of counting students and weighing what they cost to educate. So the general assumption is a high school student costs more to educate than an elementary school student, which costs more to educate than a kindergarten. They claim that because we would be leaving the district, that hold harmless provision would not apply. And our contention is that it would apply. The home harmless provision basically says that if your enrollment goes down too steeply, the state won't penalize you in proportion to what your enrollment went down. Instead, they look at the last 2 years and take the average of that.
More or less.
Jeannie says more or less. I think there's more nuance to it than that.
Okay.
Supervisory union costs. The district estimated the cost based on current costs in the district, and we've based it on schools that are actually in a supervisory union. And the common level of appraisal, we did agree that we would keep it constant as the district has kept it constant. So when you apply those, what are sort of the numbers associated with each of those? You get a 4%, we used a 4% increase on expenditures over FY 21, which is the same as the district used. We calculated a property yield based on equalized pupil of $12,006. This was a 3% increase per year applied to FY 22 numbers. We did not use excess spending threshold. We did use the FY 22 rate of 106.6 for the common level of appraisal, and we used that to get to FY 24. And then the equalized students we used what the district used, which was 185. One of the things we did that don't think the district did was their claim is that enrollment for Lincoln is going down significantly. And if that's the case, by having our own school board, we could adjust staff FTE. And so in our calculations, we have done that for FY 24. As far as we can tell, the district has not done that. There are other assumptions that the district made, which was declining enrollments. Now, if you just look at the numbers, in other words, if you look at the current K through 11th graders and move them up a notch, so they're now 1st to 12th graders, just based on that history, you'll see there's a decline. The district also looks at the last couple of years, just last 2 years, of the decrease in enrollment in Lincoln, which is pretty severe, and uses that to project a continuing decrease in the out years. Our view is that if you look at Lincoln over a 10 or 15-year period, we've had a pretty stable enrollment. And in fact, if you look at Lincoln and the other schools in the district over that period of time, that we've actually had less of a decline on a percentage basis than the other towns. So our calculation, our estimate for FY 24 was about $4 million. The district was using, we had used in our first estimate for FY 21, local revenue of $50,000. They used a figure of $100,000, so we decided to also use that. Which means a total spending for FY 24 of $3.9 million. And if you go through a bunch of calculations based on equalized pupils of 185, you get an estimated homestead tax rate of 1.66, which represents an increase of 5.6% from FY 21. So that encompasses 3 years. And if you simply divide 3 into 516, you get about a 2% increase per year. That is our estimate for being out of the district. It's about the same, I would say, as we're currently experiencing. So what are our conclusions on leaving the district? What we currently know is that based on the estimates we've done in FY21 and 24, that we believe leaving the district is financially viable. We can't precisely predict what expenditures in FY24 or the tax rates would be, but we do believe we are not going to take a significant hit. Really important that we offer some cautions here. As I said in the beginning, there are many challenges in making financial predictions, especially education spending, because the calculations are complex and they have nuances. And there are many variables that are changing all of the time. And right now, we're in a period of time where policy around education spending is changing significantly. So this makes it very difficult to make any kind of accurate calculation for out years. And Patrick and Floyd agreed with that. They believe you can look at the trend, but you can't be precise. Another caution is we're not accountants. We're certainly not experts on this subject, but we have all worked incredibly long hours learning about the system and talking to experts in the field. And if you read the Addy Independent today, you'll see that Jeannie has been identified as a math whiz. So Jeannie's sort of smirking. So that concludes what we have to talk about on the financial impact of leaving the district. Jim?
Yeah. So we just wanted to highlight here briefly the investment that this community has had and continues to have in this school. You know, everything from installing swing sets and preparing a playground back in 1953 to the very newest playground iteration. And of course, we're enormously excited at the prospects of utilizing the remarkably generous gift of Willard Jackson. And again, I'd just like to underscore how nimble and creative we could be if we were masters of our own destiny. Had our own school board, could make our own decisions, call our own shots, and determine what we want our site to look like and respond to best meeting the needs of our kids. As we have said before, we say again, with a nod to the grade 8 class of 57, that those who came before us rolled up their sleeves for the children of this community, and now it's time for us to do the same. So we want to honor their legacy by voting yes to keep our wonderful school open.
Okay, so as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to kind of just go through some of the questions that we have been asked on Front Porch Forum. We will not get to all of them, but we'll make sure that any we don't get to or any that have come in the last 24 hours or so that we will post on our website, again, safecommunityschools.org. And so we'll go through these. As I mentioned, we're doing our best to answer them. We'll be transparent if we don't know the answer or don't feel like we can give an accurate response. And then we'll open it up to any questions that you all have. So the first question, and I'm just going to kind of ask them, and then anyone on our team here will jump in to answer. We have a question: how many students are not only at the school but in each grade? I'm going to actually just answer that one. That we do have that information, and we will put that on our website. The next one: will our community be negotiating teachers' contracts?
Again, we're going to affiliate with an SU, and our board will certainly have a role to play when it comes time for that contract to be negotiated by the supervisory union and the teacher bargaining group. So yes, and who will the teachers really work for? Teachers going to be working for the board here in Lincoln. Remember again that the central office is services that are being purchased. Not to say that there won't be oversight and evaluation of the performance of the principal, for sure, by the superintendent. But you know, again, you can look back to when we were a standalone district before consolidation, and in fact, we did call our own shots.
Okay, I think we covered who pays and administers their benefits and at what cost, but do you want to just remind people?
Sure. The contracts for the staff are held by the supervisory union. Our understanding in talking to an ex-superintendent today is that the supervisory unions make every effort to balance out what the current contracts are with theirs. So they are willing to make adjustments. The benefits, healthcare benefits come through the state contract. So I think they remain the same, although I have to check on that. Pension is also handled by the state, and so nobody will lose their pension, nobody will have their pension decreased. That is a state responsibility.
And Paul, are we taking on any additional long-term pension liability?
We are not taking on any additional long-term pension liability.
And this is a question that I don't think we can really answer, but I'm going to put it out there. Somebody asked, do we have people willing to serve on the board? And we certainly hope so. We've had a really committed group of about 20, 25 people that have been working with us over the last 10 months. There are a lot of new people in town and people who are really passionate about the school. So we feel strongly that there will be people who are willing to serve. Are there any other staff we now share with other schools in the district, for example, nurse, reading specialist, et cetera, that may be impacted?
Very possible. And again, you know, we're going to be independent. We're going to be a standalone school district. We're going to be affiliated with an SU, ideally a geographically proximatous SU. So we may be doing some sharing of staff around things like reading specialists, nurse, et cetera. And they may be different than the people that are currently doing that through MAUSD.
I might just add that in our discussion this morning with an ex-superintendent who retired recently, she said that there's a lot, in her experience, there's a lot of latitude in negotiating with the supervisory union, and that would be something we would look forward to doing. And so we don't anticipate there'll be major problems, but there could be landmines.
What about special needs students? This is an additional cost.
The special needs situation has become increasingly complicated because Act 173 now will provide funding for special need students with special needs through a block grant that the supervisory union will get, which MAUSD would get. And in our conversation with Patrick, he said he had looked at it, had a feeling for how it would work, but didn't know the details. I think that is the case. Even before the block grant, as the current system is, all of the special aid money from the state and from the feds are required to come through the supervisory union in our case. So we do not believe it will have a major impact on us. but we don't have the total answer to that.
In terms of the school choice and how the district and then our school decide who and how many go where, school choice is exactly that. Parents and their students will have the choice. In terms of the varying tuition costs, again, going back to what Paul said, there were two average announced tuition costs announced every year by the state. One is for primary, which is K-6, and then 7-12 is the secondary. And that's the dollar amount that will follow students to wherever they choose to go. It's entirely possible that if the majority of students moving to grades 9-12 will opt for Mount A, it's entirely possible that the town, the school board may well decide to provide transportation.
And kind of going along with that, we did receive a question, or kind of more of a comment of why are we kind of slamming the merger, in regard to the transportation, time, basically how long our kids would be bused to Virgins, which we're estimating at over 2 hours a day. And then we're offering school choice and kids may decide to go, for example, to Middlebury or CDU. It would also be a long commute, but the point is that it's a choice for the parents and the students. If we do merge, that will not be a choice.
And again, I would just reference back, we have the master list, you can easily get it off the Agency of Education website, the 81 current choice, school choice towns in Vermont. And it's been working since 1869. So obviously there's something in play that is fundamentally sound.
Another question, if the new Lincoln district is required to affiliate with an existing district, would our 7 through 12 students be required to attend the high school of that district as part of the affiliation?
No, absolutely not. Again, school choice allows latitude for parents and students to decide where they would choose to go. It is possible, and some of you may be aware of towns that do not have and are not members of a high school union, but who send all their kids to a specified high school. That's called a designated school. That would be a decision that our school board could make in reviewing the circumstances, the situation, and could decide that they want to designate one specific high school to be, in fact, the high school that we would tuition our students to. And that might be done with some negotiations and possibility of a reasonably good deal financially. It might also include transportation. So there's all sorts of possibilities. But the short answer is, because we affiliate with an SU, for the purposes of purchasing central office services, that does not automatically obligate us to send our kids to their high school. And in fact, that SU may not operate a high school.
And kind of going along with that, there was a question about the receiving schools having a cap of how many students could attend. Do you have any comments around that?
I believe that's right, that there is a cap. I don't know, that cap, I think, is spelled out in legislation, but I don't have the details on that.
I do know that in cases where there is a cap, it would go to a lottery in determining which students would end up going there. But there are ample choices in this county. And certainly, in addition to Mount A, there will be CVU and Virginia's Union High School, and also Middlebury Union High School.
Another question is around concerns that it appears that there's a lot of research being done around the need to K through 6 students, but the answer for 7 through 12 students is simply school choice.
Well, I guess we would have to go back to the past 15 years and take a hard look at the resolve or lack of resolve of our 5-town community to actually do something about the current high school. We look at it from a financial point of view as well as from a pedagogical point of view. And what we see right now is keeping the high school open, the possibility of a merger with Addison Northwest, and that being done on the backs of closing small schools. And we question the wisdom of that in terms of current research on the value and the asset that small schools bring to the district. No easy choices. This has been the most painful issue that our group has grappled with and continue to struggle with. And then we continue to look at the money that needs to be spent simply to hold the building together. That's another $1 million for the roof, $2.5 million just to get the electrical, to conform the code, and we have to ask those tough questions.
Great, and I know that we've already said this, but I think it's important to reiterate because there were a lot of questions that came in just about how the hiring happens in our new school district, or how the staffing structure would occur.
Well, our primary take on it is that the board would have an active role and would be making recommendations to hire that would be likely vetted by the central office, but that will be SU that we affiliate with. But again, the advice we've been receiving, most recently this morning from a former superintendent, is that there's going to be a fair amount of confidence placed in the board and principal of the school in making good choices around staffing. So we don't see that as being problematic, and we're looking forward to having that latitude as a board.
Great. Let's see, we also had a few others that came in recently. How often is the school required to meet state recertification? Are we certain we can meet these requirements in the future at a reasonable cost?
I guess I'm going to say that I'm not entirely sure. I think at one point it used to be every 10 years, the recertification process, but I'm not quite certain about that now. But I don't think we would have any trouble in meeting those requirements. And we have an outstanding elementary school program here in Lincoln.
Will Lincoln teachers be offered the same pay and benefits as other local union districts?
Again, we'll be affiliating with an SU, and our teachers will be served both in terms of benefits, contractual benefits, salary, et cetera, under the prevailing teacher contract in that SU.
Great. Well, let's see here. What have we not answered? How certain are we of maintaining the quality of education in our school in the future?
It's a great question, quite frankly, and I know this will sound like a simplistic response, and I would certainly invite my colleagues to jump in as well. I think we have a darn better chance if we're running the school ourselves and we have our own board calling shots and making decisions, than being at the receiving end of decisions by a board that may not be thinking about the value that we bring to our students every day as a small school.
Let's see, how would future votes on the school budget be handled? One thing, and it appears to be the only thing which was gained in the school consolidation process, was the ability for budgets to be voted by Australian and mail-in ballot, thus avoiding the exclusionary policies of physical presence required votes during town meeting only.
Well, I can defer to the select board, but we could certainly choose to vote school budget by Australian ballot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's not a problem.
Great. Where are all of our legislators in all of this?
Thank you for asking that question. We ask ourselves that question every day. There are some serious, significant problems in this state that frankly are not being addressed. Paul mentioned earlier equalized pupil count. the whole value of the notion of equalized pupil is to not only reckon with the fact that it might cost more to educate high school kids than elementary kids, but to also factor in special needs students who require more expense than students that don't have special needs. There's also a slightly heavier weighting for students that are economically disadvantaged as opposed to non-economically disadvantaged students. And the system is sorely out of whack. It was developed some 30, 40 years ago. It's in dire need of an overhaul. A massive study was done on the University of Vermont. You can access that study online through the Agency of Education, and it makes some spectacular recommendations. And by the way, I should note also that it also does conclude that there is tremendous value in seeing that the disparity between the achievement of disadvantaged and non-disadvantaged students appears to be minimized based on the small size of the school. This is yet another nugget that we looked at in supporting our contention about the value of schools. So what's happening with this study? It's currently being tabled. And the last we understood was that the Secretary of Education and the agency were declaring that they didn't have the resources to fully enact this, that they want to hire a consultant to take a closer look at how they might implement it over time. That's just one little example of the bottleneck that occurs at the state level in addressing pressing problems, others being, of course, the spiraling cost of healthcare that have such an enormous impact on every single one of us who live in small towns and larger towns for that matter as well.
Okay, one more question. Someone told me that if the exit proposal passes, that the town will not own the school building and we will have to pay rent. Is this true?
That is not true. We will, according to, as I understand, according to the consolidated agreement, when MAUSD was formed, the schools are given the option of buying it back for $1 and having to assume the debt.
Right. Okay, again, if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to us, but Oakley, I'm gonna pass it over to Oakley, who's going to take questions from all you folks.
Okay, thank you, and I think that I'm gonna try and do this by using the chat function to get in the question and answer queue. I see some hands are going up, but the problem is that I don't know what everyone's name is because they're not necessarily identified correctly or at all on the Zoom. So if you could direct messages to the select board in the chat function, I will call on you if you tell me what your name is. And so Deirdre Kelly is asked, we will ask the first question.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think it's so obvious, but it's important to just start with a lot of gratitude for everyone for showing up, for asking challenging questions, for obviously the folks on the Safe Community Schools. You know, your work is like tremendous. You know, it's like couple full-time jobs. So we couldn't be here without all of that engagement, and that's just really important to say. And I think at best we have so much more work ahead of us. So thank you. I have just a comment and then a quick question. So the comment is, I hear lots of people saying that this is a decision that's for Lincoln School, that we have to put Lincoln students first. And I just want to gracefully question that. I actually think that when I think about voting yes for this, I actually think it's a vote for all students. And what I mean by that is I care just as much as a Bristol kindergarten student as I do for Lincoln. And I think it's really important that we think about if we can pull this off financially and educationally wise, that we're setting ourselves as a model for Addison County, for the 4 other school districts for Vermont. And I think that's really important, not to pit ourselves like our town versus others. And I don't think the people who are created this proposal are doing that. I just really want us to steer ourselves bigger and wider than that. I think it's my beliefs, but I also think that's going to serve us well if we pass this vote as we go to the 4 districts who will be other towns. They're going to be really nervous to vote yes, because they'll be nervous that we're being self-centered, and they're going to be nervous that their taxes will go out a lot. So I think I just want to frame that a little bit bigger because I think it's true. And then, so my question is about local control. I love the idea of pulling back the local control for K through 6. It's the best education when students and teachers and guardians and parents have the center, the voice. I know we'll have great local control K through 6, but I think, and this is where I just want to make sure I have it right, 7 through 12 will be losing some control. We won't have any school board where Lincoln will be represented, I believe so. Right now we have 2 great school board members, but we don't have anyone sitting on a board in the future. And I'm not sure how and if we'll actually be voting on any of the budgets for the middle school and high school. So I know we'd be able to advocate as parents and community members and students at the school board, but I just want to have clear eyes that I think that we'll have great local control for elementary school, and then we'll have a little less control, like our real power will be where we send 7 through 12 students. So just let me know if I've got that right. And I just want to say that doesn't change that I think this is a good proposal. I just want to have clear-eyed of what we mean by local control. Thank you.
Deidre, I just want to commend you on your comments. We made a conscious decision to make sure that our group was not referenced as Save Our School, but rather Save Community Schools, because we do believe that there is an unfortunate trend afoot, and that is that community schools are continually becoming jeopardized as a result of consolidation and perceived beliefs that it costs more to educate kids in smaller schools. In terms of 7-12, no question, if we tuition kids, we're not going to have the kind of say we would have on multiple boards, whether kids are Middlebury Union or Regents Union or whatever. Could I just add that a hope, a dream would be that down the road, this step we're taking might be one more, kind of incentive or impetus to really take a hard look at how we want to educate secondary students, not only in our district, but in the county, and really start thinking about some of the bigger picture concepts around, for instance, a joint Addison County High School. As our high school enrollments across the county appear to be declining, doesn't it make sense, in the interest of scale and for equal representation, that we might someday arrive at an equitable way to provide secondary education to all students that would also speak to the question you raised, which is having some say in that as well. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that. And I just want to flag something that's in the chat column as well, that someone had raised a question about, have we considered that students need to reapply each year for school choice? No one is guaranteed, and
Just interrupt. So I saw that question come through, so I looked up the Q&As on the Agency of Education website. I can send you a link to that, and I'll just read it to you. And that is, once students enroll in another school, they may remain until they graduate unless they no longer live in Vermont or unless they have been suspended or expelled. This is a Q&A that was revised in August of 2016. It may be that there has been something that changed, but this is what the Agency of Education has posted on their website.
yeah, and a big shout out to Christopher Ross from the IDND as well for responding on the chat board with that information also. Very important.
All right, we have a question from Michael Dennison, which I'll read unless Michael would like to, but I'll just start out by saying, with this question, which is, what happens if other towns don't vote to let Lincoln leave?
Well, that's the nature of the statute, that we will remain in the district. It's that simple.
Okay. Alan Kamen is up next.
I'm with you. Can you guys hear me?
Hear you.
Okay, I just want to, there we go. I'm just trying to switch to make sure I don't feedback or anything like that. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to speak. Let me just put my picture up here so people know who I am. I am a little out of Zoom practice, forgive me. Can you see me now too? I guess it doesn't matter. I guess I first of all, I really want to thank everybody of the 20 people, because Andrew told me there were 20 of you that have done all the work to really address this. You know, I've lived in this town for almost 30 years. Many of you know that I worked at Mount Abraham for 21. I worked in education prior to that. In fact, Jim was one of my supervisors years ago. So, you know, there's always good close connections in Vermont. Mr. Ferlenza, I do thank you, because one of the points I wanted to make was, you know, not to vilify Patrick Reen. I mean, he was hired to do a job. He works for the Mount Abe School Board with representatives from all 5 towns. So, you know, I really firmly believe that he is doing the best he can. And I would believe that the boards are doing the best they can. You know, I appreciate the fact that he went back and sought some different proposals. So I would hesitate a little to focus, you know, so hard on the December 7th, 2020 meeting proposal. And I know committees are reviewing those now. And, you know, one of the things that reminded me of was when Phil Scott, in his first year as governor of Vermont, made some pretty bold statements and ideas about policy change in Vermont education, you know, and he was able to adjust those based on feedback that he got, you know, and I trust that MAUSD board and Patrick are doing the same. I mean, really, it's a decision-making process. It's an educational process. It's a transferable skill that we teach to our students in our K-12 schools. So that seems to be what is happening. I just want to be clear, and I feel like I'm taking a personal risk in doing this, but I'm going to do it. I just feel like, given the information that's been presented, you know, with all due respect, I want to base a decision on, you know, facts and costs. And for all the work that's been done, I appreciate that. But it just doesn't feel like there's clear enough answers for me to give a yes vote on August 24th, which I believe is about 9 days or 5 days or something from now. So, you know, I think it's important to think about that. I, like Deirdre, believe that all the elementary schools in all the 5 towns can provide a quality education, a K-6 education to all kids. Having worked with students from all 5 towns, you know, that's apparent to me. Our graduates at Mount Abraham have always done really great things. And in all honesty, I think that MAUSD and ANWSU are on the right track to merge. I think there's too much administration going on. I mean, a county the size of Addison County could easily be administered by 1 superintendent. I mean, frankly, the state of Vermont could easily be administered by 2. So, you know, if we want to look at cost savings, I think that's a way to look that would save significant costs. And I think that's important to consider. The other thing, it's my understanding that Representative Cordes is introducing a bill to change educational funding. So that's another reason that would get me to hesitate to vote to secede now, because it's another part of the puzzle that is an unanswered question. Chris Nezin in the chat referred to a comment from another community member about, you know, if we secede now, can we get back in if we want to? That's a really good question. I'd never thought of that. I do want to be clear that I am not opposed to seceding from MAUSD in principle in any way. You know, I like the idea of local control. My question is, how much does it cost to have local control? And again, I appreciate all the work that's done. One thing I've always said in my role in education is people, you know, have roles that are you know, more critical than mine. They're paid more handsome salaries because they know what they're doing. And I kind of trust that would be the case. So anyway, I just want to know that if I were asked to vote tonight at this point without enough information, I really feel in good conscience I would have to vote no, just because some things I think dominoes are going to fall in the next several months that might provide a clearer picture of what it means to secede. So I would urge caution in feeling pressure to do that. And, you know, there's no disagreement for me that things are happening perhaps in the wrong order. But I guess, you know, that kind of is what it is right now. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to share these thoughts. I'll stop talking now. You know, I do have lots and lots of questions, but I think you guys are doing great. And I also really appreciate that you have addressed every email I've sent and you have addressed every question that's been raised on Front Porch Forum. I think that speaks to the integrity and professionalism of your committee. Thank you.
So, Alan, I'm going to take a first pass. It's a bunch of really great points. It is entirely, we will not have all the facts, and we will not have all the costs, and every single exact thing we need so that you wouldn't even have to make a vote because it would be obvious that you would vote. I don't know how to assure you or anyone else that that we can you know, summon up a crystal ball and see exactly what kind of legislative changes are definitely going to happen and when, and how things are going to fall into place that will allow every one of us to make a vote knowing that we got every single bit of information we need. There's always going to be some nebulous, and I think this is also true when you look at what we discussed earlier about the assumptions that the board has projected a significant tax rate for Lincoln based on us leaving, and those assumptions are assumptions. So I guess I'm being totally honest with you and saying that you have to vote your conscience, and I know that you will, and I admire you for asking the questions that you've asked. I would caution you not to put a lot of faith in further consolidation. We haven't seen anything yet from Act 46 that even closely resembles the promises that were made about what was going to come about as a result of consolidation. The one true benefit that has definitely emerged is that superintendents' lives are easier because they're not going to umpteen board meetings. They now have one board that's certified by district. But I would be to show you. So anyways, I'm just saying, the idea that it makes all the sense in the world to further consolidate, I think will occur.
Ridiculous.
Occur at the expense of additional schools being closed. And so waiting will probably be an option that some voters, some neighbors are going to say, that's what I'm comfortable with. And it comes with some potential peril and risk that we might very well lose our schools. So not holding that as a threat or a scare tactic, but I'm just saying that these 20 people that I'm a part of do feel that there is a sense of urgency about acting. And I'm going to hand it over to Paul to kind of, you know, fill in a few gaps that I'm sure I've created here.
Thanks, Jim. 2 points. One is, I just want to remind people that the window on our ability to withdraw is closing. That once this merger committee makes the decision to merge, there is a very high probability we will not have a vote on withdrawing. The second thing is a question I've been asked a couple of different times by different people, and that is that if we start this process, so if we vote yes to leave the district, and then the 4 other towns vote yes, is there any way we can stop this? And I've done a little research, have not found other examples, but it is my belief that, having read lots of minutes of the State Board of Education, that you can always stop the process. We would need at some point to make a formal request to the State Board of Education. And in that case, if things really look different, we could stop the process. We do not intend to do that, but I wanted to answer that. The other thing I wanted to say was, yes, Mary Corvus has introduced some legislation that would move the way we pay property taxes to all income sensitivity, which I believe will be an advantage to the majority of residents in Vermont.
How long it will take, we don't know, but thank you for raising that, Alan, because it is exciting to think that there's at least conversation in Montpelier about really changing up something that has become remarkably burdensome, i.e. property tax.
All right, thanks. Next question comes from Mike Fisher.
Good evening, everyone. I want to add my thank yous to everyone who's been mentioned. I want to add also my thank yous to the leadership, our representatives on the select board and our representatives on the school board, as well as leadership at the supervisory union. Leadership's hard. I'll just add a little note, given the last comment. If I introduced any number of bills that were really fun to introduce and hung on the wall. So the introduction of a bill, while I appreciate Mari's work on that, we all know, guarantees nothing. So I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm voting yes. And a little bit of background for those who don't know. I was one of Lincoln's 2 representatives on the Act 46 study committee. I am one of the 3 proud members who vote of the Act 46 committee who voted no. But that doesn't mean I didn't win some battles in that study committee. There were quite a few that I think were really important that are part of our articles of agreement that I'm proud to have been a part of and I think are super, super important. The first of which has been covered by others. It was a unanimous vote that we would have not be able to close a school without the vote of the members of that community. That was something that was not, every member of the Act 46 committee agreed to that and felt passionately enough about it that we put it on the actual article to be voted on, because we believe, the members of the committee believed the only way to really pass the consolidation was to assure voters you couldn't close their school without them having a say. I'll mention another article in that is less talked about, and that's the school attendance article. And that one I also believe was a unanimous vote. And it says in part, a board shall support and continue the elementary education of students at the school located in the town where they reside. Plain language. Can't close a school without the vote of the community, and you have to send the kids from that community to the school. So there's a few reasons why I'm voting yes. The first, actually, let me first recognize, I appreciate and I agree with other people's statements about not questioning other people's motives. Leadership is hard, and people are doing their very best. But one of the reasons why I feel we have to vote yes is the superintendent's proposal itself. I wish, my good friend Alan Cameron, who spoke before me, I wish I could say that I thought people were learning and adjusting their proposals given the evidence. A straight face reading of the articles of agreement that we promised each other are not being followed here, and sort of, it's a little bit for me over the top that you could say, we're not going to send the students of Lincoln to the Lincoln School, we're gonna repurpose it and use it for other kids to come for, to come to for innovation, and still call it an open school is, I'm just gonna say, it's over the top for me. I can't get over it. It is so far from a reasonable interpretation of the Articles of Agreement. And so that gives me a challenge, because I don't want to question anyone's motives, and I really want to believe in the best of everybody. But it's hard for me, so I just say it as a personal statement, it's hard for me to get past the continued push for that from the superintendent's office, and believe that and trust other things that are coming from that office. That's just a really personal statement. So my second reason for voting yes is that the majority of the board has not unequivocally rejected that proposal. There have been some board members who have spoken clearly about it. I want to thank our board members, and I also want to thank in particular Caleb Elder, who was as clear as could be about it. But the majority of that board has not said, no, we can't entertain this. The third reason is that the superintendent and the board went behind closed doors, brought in an attorney, went into executive session to develop a legal strategy to fight against what I think is an obvious plain language reading of our Articles of Agreement. And then the fourth reason is the decision by the board to join the MAUSD Northwest Merger Study Committee. I'm floored by the decision to let go of their decision making and set this. The train is a good metaphor. Set that train on the tracks. Like I say, I've been a part of a merger study committee. I know how they get a head of steam behind them, and I know how they start to think about how do we accomplish it, not should we accomplish it. And so I agree with the analysis that we have to act now. I think that if others agree with me that the town of Lincoln and other towns should get to vote before their town school is closed, and I'm saying closed clearly here, because that's what I believe it is, then we have to vote yes in order to preserve our ability to have control over the Lincoln School. Thank you. Thank you again for everybody. Thank you.
We just want to thank you for your comments, Michael, and I think we've got time for maybe another question or two, Oakley.
Yeah, I've got two more that would like to ask questions or make statements. So we'll go first to Rob Backlund.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, sorry. I always have to ask. I have a couple notes here, so I apologize if I look down. I'm one of the representatives on the MAUSD board, and I do want to remind folks that I am speaking for myself only, not on behalf of the board or other board members. I want to thank everyone here tonight, obviously, and all of the letters, emails, some phone calls, in-person meetings I've had with folks since I've been on the board, and definitely primarily since after December 7th of last year, when our superintendent put out his long-term facilities use proposal. So I urge you to stay engaged, please, with this process, or whatever the vote is. Stay engaged, and you can reach out to me. I'll throw my phone number in the chat. I live at the end of County Road. You can't drive by our house, so stop by. Love to hear your questions, and I'll try to get them answered. If I don't have the answers, I'll reach out and see if I can get those answers for you. I have to recognize that speaking about this topic tonight might have consequences for me as a board member, but I feel that not offering my opinion would possibly have greater consequences. And so I accept whatever will come of that, and at least I'll probably sleep better at night after I get this out of my system. To be honest, the situation that our school district faces presently, with 2 of our 5 towns, ourselves, Lincoln and Starksboro, either moving forward with a vote to withdraw or having special meetings in those regards to discuss withdrawing from the district, it's hard to stomach as a board member. And it really falls directly on the shoulders of the board. I take responsibility for some of it. And I hope that as a board, we can move forward and work to try to build back some trust. This is a really big breach in trust. And I think it's been building ever since the vote to merge, and has only amplified by recent actions in our district. And so I'm going to continue working on hopefully building back some of the trust with our member towns, our community members, our teachers, our staff members. But this falls on the board. Let's speak a little bit for my family. So if I say we, I apologize. But we moved to Lincoln a couple of years ago. Moved in January 2019, and really all we knew about Lincoln was that it was obviously a beautiful place on this planet, and that it was the home of world-class childhood education. When you think about the Lincoln Cooperative Preschool, outstanding, and then it had a one-of-a-kind elementary school on the banks of the New Haven River in the Lincoln Community School. I mean, that's really it. We didn't really know anybody else here. We didn't know much about the community. We knew that the general store had good baked goods because we stopped there and we came to look at the place, but we really didn't know much. And in 2.5 years, even with the portion of that time sort of locked down due to a pandemic, we realized that Lincoln is sort of a community as a verb. It's not an idea of a community. It's or it's the idea of a noun, a physical place. It's an active process. Our community is active. We participate. Lincoln, in my sense, communities. And, I've done a little digging into history, and I've spoken with some of our elders recently, ever since this vote was warned, just to better understand what I see as sort of a cultural thread in this town that is, I feel like, has been woven in, and we felt the prick of it here at the end of County Road. It's a thread that really speaks to this idea of community. And we recognize it, and we're so grateful that it has been woven since sort of the late 18th century up here in the hills of Vermont, that people sort of pick themselves up by their bootstraps. There's been blood, sweat, and tears from Lincolnites from the past and present that have been shed. And because of it, a couple of years ago, a family from Burlington who knew nothing about this town had the ability to move here, and we benefit from all that effort, all that culture, all that history. I think about this town, and before, like I said, I didn't know much about it, but 4 decades ago, a fire destroyed our church. So the community rallied and literally moved another church to that place because we knew it would make the community stronger. The library was flooded. So again, the town rallied, saved what books it could, wrote letters asking for more, and continually invests in that library because it makes our community stronger. Our community realized that its elders needed more accessible and affordable housing, that they could be socially active also. The town rolled up its sleeves, got out their tools, and renovated and built Weather Vane, because taking care of our elders makes our community stronger. Folks saw a need for early childhood education. Land was generously donated. People learned how to use dynamite, and boom, we have a preschool here, a thriving preschool with a wait list, because that preschool makes this community stronger. And 70 years ago, an elementary school burned. And, the state said that many of the Lincoln schools at the time weren't up to code, and that it would probably cost the town way too much to build a school to code. And yet, according to Hattie Brown at its dedication in 1954, over 50 Lincolnites put in 5,000 hours of sweat equity to build a new community school. And because they knew that there's no better vehicle to strengthen our community than to support the education of their children. And so I guess, I've been thinking about this vote, a whole heck of a lot since I saw that it was warned. And it's a question for me that's shown a light on the history of our town. And in essence, for most, I think the question is, what is the cost of having LCS in our community? Cost and thinking about dollars and cents. But I hope that you vote, and I hope that you consider about what cost could be in a more holistic sense. One that weighs the history and culture of our town, the legacy of our elders, and the future for our children, and the strength and resilience of our community in the days and years ahead. So when you vote, I would challenge you to frame the question differently. Ask yourself, what are the costs of not having LCS in our community? To be frank, no matter what the result of the vote, as a taxpayer, you will still have a cost for education out of your back pocket. But in one scenario, in my opinion, you will not also have a void in the legacy, culture, and ethos of Backyard. And no matter how you vote, because I know some of my neighbors probably don't agree with me, know that, and I hope other folks feel the same, that I'll still offer you a hand up if you fall. I'll pull you out of the ditch if you get stuck. And if you ever need a cup of sugar, stop by the end of County Road. So thank you all to Safe Community Schools for this incredible effort. And I do want to acknowledge the teachers that are on this meeting tonight. I wish you well, and thank you for all your work heading into another uncertain school year. Thank you.
I just, Oakley, if it's okay, wanted to answer one of the questions in the chat. My question is, what would the incentive be for the other towns in our district to allow us to withdraw? The answer I'm going to give, I think, is a little perverse, but we were told by someone in the district administration that we are the expensive school and it would be a financial advantage to the district for us to withdraw. I would hope that's not the reason towns vote, but the reality is that is an incentive.
All right, thank you, Paul. And we have a statement and a question from Will Sipsey.
Hey, I know how to unmute myself. I used to be an IT manager, and I can now run Zoom. I'm voting yes. And the reason that I'm voting yes is, well, a bunch of reasons, but I think the compelling reason here for anybody that's on the fence is you're looking at the 50, how many years has it been since 1953? Boys, let's see. So that's like 68 years, isn't it? I went to school in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first state to require compulsory elementary education. My father was an elementary school principal. My mother was an elementary school teacher. I have a high value on education. Education is the reputation of the Lincoln School was one of the reasons that we moved here. The other reason was there was a cheap house that nobody else wanted. That was 35 years ago. But I think you look at the 68 year, the history of that building and the history of that property, and the people and the sweat equity, and the generations of play yards that have been put up there. Because I was down there when that new one was put up. And there was some young guy down there that said, you know what the last people that built this playground did? They built it with pressure treated lumber. And I was like, yeah, that was us. We did that. Sorry. You're gonna let that heritage slip into the hands of Montpelier. Montpelier is going to own that property on River Street, on River Road. You're going to let Montpelier decide what happens to that piece of property. If we vote yes, If we vote yes, we decide what happens to that property. We decide, not Montpelier. Take control of what belongs to Lincoln. Our school belongs to us. That's it.
Thanks. Hopefully, there are really two people in town who know an awful lot about the Lincoln Elementary School. And I wondered if we might ask Tori if she'd like to weigh in on any of these issues. I don't mean to put you on the spot. And certainly if you don't want to, that's fine. But I thought we'd at least ask.
Hi, can you hear me? I just want to thank everyone for their comments and wisdom and perspective. I don't have anything to add. I'm just really delighted to be part of this community where there are so many people who are invested and really curious about this process and really are looking for a positive outcome. So thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Tori, and thanks to all of you here tonight. And it is getting late, and I don't see any more questions. So with that, if you folks have nothing left to say, I'll close the meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Jeannie
All
has
right.
a-
No,
it's
like, you
Oh,
Okay, thanks everybody for joining on Zoom, and thanks for being flexible about that.
One more comment. I was asked to remind folks. So everybody should have gotten a mail-in ballot. You are welcome at any time to drop that off, no later than 7 p.m. on the 24th, in the lockbox that's attached to the entrance of the town office. And the polls will be open on Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.